Hey everyone, welcome to How You Go There. I'm Scott Montgomery, and I'm thrilled to kick off this series where we walk through the How You Go There workbook together.
And I'm your co-host, Linda Misegadis. We're diving into the real stories and steps behind personal and professional growth.
Before you can chart out a new path, you have to understand the path that brought you here. And this series is all about slowing down, reflecting, and getting curious about your experiences. That's how you go there. Well, good morning, Linda Misegadis. How are you today?
Good morning, Scott Montgomery. I am crabby. I'm just going to be transparent. I've been a little grouchy lately, and
Okay.
I've got to get out of this funk. But I have to tell you, recording our episodes and doing our thing always makes me smile. So
That's good. And it's good. And the
yeah.
troubles of the world can be released right now, and we can be together.
I'm gonna do a little box breathing.
Do a
I'm
little box
gonna,
breathing. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. I'm gonna find a
Take a
little
minute.
Linda time. Exactly. So
This is the realness of our podcast. This is why we're
yes,
with people. Everyone has a grumpy day, and we're all
that's
allowed.
right. We all
So
have them. That's
we're,
right. Yes,
we're going to turn
exactly.
that frown upside down.
That's right.
Let's go. Today, we're going to talk about goals.
Which is exciting. I'm actually looking forward to this one because, the last couple of episodes we've talked about habits,
Mhm.
and those are so important because, like we talked about, habits are what really kind of feed your goals. But today, it's like we're going to get honest about what we're doing day to day and kind of like what's
What's our
serving
purpose? Where
us
are we
and what's
taking it?
not.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I don't know about you, but I always kind of like when we start reflecting on this stuff, the question that always comes up for me a little bit is like, okay, so where am I actually trying to go? Which fits
Right.
nicely with this podcast we do, which is how
Yes.
you go there. So,
Yes, totally. And, habits for me are operating in peak performance, right? You do the habits so you can work in
yes,
peak performance. If you're going to set a goal, let's do it at peak performance. So they do segue together really nicely. And
they
we
do.
we talked a lot about that, but goals. You grabbed a quote that I'm going to share. Forgive me
Yeah.
for the phone ringing.
Are you new to podcasting? I was
I
just
am new to
curious.
podcasting. I'm just really super busy, popular, and all the people want to talk to me the minute we go live. So,
The
I'm
phone
just
starts
going to
ringing
turn it
off the hook.
off. Yes, yes. All the people, all the people want to
All
talk
the
to me
people.
live.
That's right.
Yes, yes. And so it begins. They should line up outside my door soon.
That's right.
But you gave a nice quote to this podcast. We were starting to do our outline, and I'm going to make sure I read it correctly. But it sort of summarizes how you separate habits from goals and why there's a good dovetail in that. And you said it. You said in one of our conversations, dreams live in our heads, actions live in our calendar, and goals connect the two. When I didn't have clear goals, I chased too many things. Smart goals forced me to slow down and get specific about what mattered most.
Yeah.
So if you're going to do that, and we're going to talk about that today,
Yeah.
why habits mattered is so that you could do them in peak performance.
Exactly. No. Well, and I think the other thing that we want to talk about, or what we're going to kind of talk about today, is that we're not talking about in a pressure filled way either. Not like that New Year's resolution nonsense where,
No.
you're going to all of a sudden create some crazy goals that you're never going to achieve anyway because you're not going to put the steps and the work into doing it. But we're going to talk about it
Those
in
are
a
more
way
like
that really gives
actions,
your life
right?
direction, right? Yeah. It's the action behind all of that because, and it's about the intentionality, right? That's one of the
Right.
things that we talk about a lot is it's really being intentional in what
Mhm.
you're trying to do. So, but before we kind of jump into it, I wanted to share, I'm going to be a little vulnerable here in sharing because what I've learned, and definitely sometimes the hard way, is that if you don't define your goals, you end up chasing things that don't actually matter to you. And
Mhm.
that was a lot of, when
Mhm.
I think about myself and kind of where I got here today, um, goals for me didn't start out the way people might expect because early in my career, I didn't have goals. I had this belief that if I worked really hard and I always raised my hand to take on more work and I just did a great job, that someone would notice. And behind that would follow promotions and opportunities and salary increases. And it would all just be a natural flow, right? Because honestly, that's what I was taught. I mean, my parents were blue collar workers. They were incredibly hardworking. And it was like you kept your head down, you do the work and good things come from that. And
Mhm.
While there is a lot of value in that mindset, what I definitely learned was, I stayed busy, I grew an experience, and I built a strong reputation, but I wasn't moving forward with any intention. Like,
Mhm.
I was just following the path that others were taking me on, which I'm grateful for. So I don't want to, I
You
have
maximized them. You
gratitude in it,
absolutely
right?
maximized them. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Because I took
But
advantage of those
right.
opportunities, but those weren't my opportunities per se, where I set out an intentional goal to say, "I'm going to be this," or "I want to achieve this." It was
Mhm.
more of a, "Hey, there's this other opportunity over here," and I just kind of followed along with it,
Yeah.
and I was just kept saying yes to continuing to hard work, like, but I never stop to say, "Does this align with where I wanna go?" Like, who do I wanna be when I grow up, right?
Right.
Taking that time to kind of sort through that, and it really wasn't until much later in my career that I stepped back and asked myself, "Where am I actually trying to go?" And
Mhm.
that's when it changed everything for me, honestly. It's like, when once I started kind of thinking about setting more, intentional goals, then
Mhm.
I wasn't just working hard anymore, but I was working
Right.
with a purpose. I was trying to accomplish something. So, but I'm just, curious because Scott, you and I have very different, like that's how I came up, but you didn't come up that same path.
Well, no, I didn't, and I was sitting here thinking, and there's a lot of people who find value in task-oriented achievements,
Mhm.
and I never did. I was always a visionary trying to get to an
Yeah.
end game, but
Yeah.
tying habits again back to the idea that I followed a rigorous pattern to my day that
Mhm.
created space to go back and reflect on what my goals would be.
Mm.
So tying those things together, I was aware of needing to be able to be in peak performance, which allowed space for me to create my goals. I want that person's job. I want revenue. I need a house at the beach. I want to pay for my kids' college. I want, and a lot of my successes around achieving those goals was again because I had the habits and I made time for the space. And if I made
Right.
time for the space to reflect on what my goals would be. And if this is a great opportunity, as I always do so shamelessly, the exercises in here
Yes.
allow you to take the time to make the space to reflect on what your goals were so you don't find yourself on
Yeah.
this wheel you just described of
Right.
harder work means more goals and not sure what my goal was, right?
Exactly. What am I trying to achieve? And one of the things that you have in the workbook here is right here, this create
Yeah,
vision
vision
board.
board.
Can we talk about that for a minute? Because honestly,
100%.
I always thought vision boards were stupid. I mean,
No,
if I'm just being honest with you, like I thought, how silly is that you're going to create this, vision board of, putting these things on there. But again, as I do self reflection, a little self awareness, it's not stupid at all. Talk
right.
about why a vision board is actually a really good exercise to go through.
Well, and that's kind of what I was teasing out a minute ago when we said we had different styles of approach to business,
Yeah,
right? So mine was always geared towards relationships. I geared on the product being outdated in 6 months, not
yeah.
expert in the product, right? And
Yes,
so
yes, yes, yeah,
a
yeah.
vision board allowed me to call in the right direction and I had to
Okay.
be available to the shifts in the moment too, right? So I
Right.
used to think, I remember one of my mentors used to listen to me process my vision board, right? So this is a
Yeah.
tactical way in the companion guide to create some space to say, just write
Mhm.
down some words and see where it takes you and what your goals would be because your goals aren't always obvious. You need to take a minute to reflect on
Yeah.
what could emerge,
Yeah.
which is what you said about yours as well.
Yeah.
Once you did
Mhm.
that, you're kind of like, why am I on this wheel of this job? It
Yeah.
doesn't really align with my goals, but I think for me, you call it in, you create the space, and you create. My mentor used to say to me, "Stop looking at a 10-year plan, look at a 5-year plan, a
Yeah.
2-year plan, and a 6-month
Oh,
plan."
okay. Yeah. Yeah.
So when I learned I had permission to achieve smaller goals at the big
Okay.
game, it
Yeah.
made life so much easier. With over a decade of experience, WorldGate LLC is your trusted partner in IT staffing and project management tailored for the public sector. We help government agencies and organizations navigate complex technology landscapes, implement effective workforce solutions, and build high-performing teams from strategic staffing to seamless systems integrations. We bring the experience and reliability to execute, empower, and exceed for our customers. Staffing? Check. Project management? Check. Public sector solutions? Check. Experience you can trust. Visit our website at www.worldgatellc.com today. Well, and that's a really, really important thing for people. And weight loss and New Year's resolutions are fantastic to think about, because while I would say that losing weight is a goal, you can't parse out the goal and say, I'm going to achieve this goal here, without having what we introduce in the companion guide and we introduce here are SMART goals to achieve that other goal, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Specific,
Yeah. That's
measurable,
fair.
achievable, relevant, time bound. And we have exercises that help people. If you can envision what your goal is in the vision board, right? And then you can literally sit down and say, how am I going to parse those out with a SMART goal, right? Specific. What can I do? I'm going to change my diet. I'm going to, eat differently, and I'm going to work out 2 days a week. It's measurable, 2 days a week. How much are you lifting? It's achievable. You can go. You can do it in your basement. You can do it outside, right? Is it relevant? Well, burning calories helps you lose weight, so it's relevant. And then, the last one, and I forget what the last one is because I can never remember them all. Time bound. I want to do that in
Yeah.
6 months, not
Yes. Yeah.
10 years.
Well, and that's what I like about what you just said there too, is because I think that's the other piece of it, is that if you don't put any time, I know for me too, like I am, as my I have a unique skill set in that I can get a lot of stuff done in a very short period of time, probably more than some people can. It's just a skill that I have. But it comes out of a little bit of crazy, but also a little bit of if I don't establish a
ADHD,
time bound for
right? A
a
little bit of
little
ADHD.
OCD, a
We
little,
have that, all
yeah,
that.
let's just go through the psychology dictionary that's out
Right.
there. But
I get shit done is what it means.
that's what it means. Exactly. How I get it done is crazy, but that's okay. But along those same lines is if I don't establish, though, a time for myself, I'll procrastinate all the way up to the end. And I was even that way in school. It's like if I didn't give myself a time to get something done, then I would just procrastinate on doing it, and then I'd get it done at the last minute. And even I might still do it at the last minute, but if I know when that last minute is, then I'm going to achieve it by that time, right? So, but without a time, I'll never get it done, because who cares, right?
Right.
There has to be
Smart
some
goals.
type of a specific time bound around that, right?
Yeah. And I think it's
Yeah.
really important that people consider what they're doing, right? My son said to me the other day, work smarter, not harder, right? And I said, well, what are you
Yeah.
trying to do? And he's like, well, I'm going to try and get my degree, and I'm going to have it be the highest GPA possible. I said, so then what are you going to set as your goals and your tasks? And
Yeah.
let's break it down.
Well, in the workbook as well here, we also have types of goals, right? And I think that kind of speaks to what you were just describing with your son, is that, when setting goals, you kind of want to sort them into a time
Yeah.
goal, which
Mhm.
are specific time frames. Like you use the example in the workbook, completing a 5K in under 30 minutes, or meeting a financial target. And then you have focus goals, and those involve concentration and consistency. So like reading a book or getting the highest GPA. It's like those are really focus goals. You've got to put some real effort behind those. And then topic-based goals. Those are a little more broader goals related to maybe personal, professional development, or financial improvement. So, if you would say, I want to make sure I have my 6-month emergency fund in my saved up, that could be a good topic-based goal, right? Where you've got that, and then you're going to take the steps to do it. But in here, kind of breaks that down. But talk about why those three, why time, focus, and topic-based.
Well, I'm also going to say that in the effort of writing my book to begin with, I had a great coach that I worked with for 12 years nonstop, who helped me synthesize what I was trying to say about goals and what I had
Okay.
learned about goals into those three categories. So, in full transparency, I had used the scenarios but never labeled them time, focus, and topic based, like
Yeah.
this woman did for me in editing and reviewing my book with me. So what I always did is came at it from here's what I did, and then she
Yeah.
helped break it down to time focused and topic based goals. So in full transparency,
Oh, gotcha.
I appreciated that effort in trying to synthesize what I was saying there, and she
Yeah.
did a beautiful job. And because I was always a SMART goal person, I understood SMART goals. They're easy, specific, measurable. They work in business, they work in life, and they work in everything else. But at the end of the day, you can spray and pray too. And if you don't want to live in a
Yeah.
smart scenario, you can live in a time goal or a focus goal or a topic-based goal, and they're intertwined. They can be or
Okay.
they can be
Okay.
separate. And so
Yeah.
my time goals were, I wanted kids by 40. My focus goals were I needed to write my book and get that done by a certain date. And
Right.
actually, funny thing about that, my focus goal right now is to take another version of the companion guide and let's dive a little deeper in time for
Yeah.
Christmas. Another shameless plug. But,
That's okay.
and that's a topic based goal as well. Let's go a little deeper
Yes.
than we even are on this podcast. Let's integrate
Yeah.
the exercise of understanding these things. So while we're reviewing all of these SMART goals and
Mhm.
types of goals and time-based goals, my next version wants to take it a little further and understand the underbelly of those tasks. These are almost task type goal
Yeah.
things,
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
interestingly enough, that's how I use these. And I think it was a great way for people to take, again, relationships, partnerships, then they do habits. And now you're working on why you have relationships, partnerships, and you do these habits. You create
Mhm.
these goals. And if you want to be generic, they can be time-based, focus-based, or topic-based. If you want to get real specific, you can label them as SMART goals as well.
So, I want to break down the SMART goal just a little bit because, SMART goals have been around forever. That term has been around for as long as I've been working in the industry. And so, but when I see you'll see that guidance all the time for employees, like, it's performance review time,
Hmm.
or it's
Hmm.
beginning of the year and we're putting
I
it
had an
together.
employee
And
try and do that to me. I want to give you my SMART goals for my review, and we're going to
yeah,
set them
well,
up. And
yeah, exactly. And you get the little handout, right? I got my little handout, and it's like, okay, when you're creating goals for your employees, they should be SMART goals. And so, but is it actually possible? I don't believe it is. So I want to hear your perspective on it. Is it actually possible for me to create SMART goals for you, Scott Montgomery? I mean, I feel like you have to create your own goals. I can validate that those align with the direction of the organization or they align with your job or whatever, but I can't create your goals for you, can I?
yeah, I think you can, actually.
Then
I think
tell
you
me
can.
how.
And I think that's why there's job descriptions. That's why we hire new employees. And that's why
Yeah.
we're aligned in our interview for the mission, right? So
Okay.
when I bring someone onto the team, I can break down the goals of the mission in a SMART goals format to make it more
Okay.
digestible. But I would also align with that person. Are these achievable for you? And then
Okay.
you're for hire. And now let's measure those throughout the mission of the business because
Okay.
you're representing the employee. You tell them this is what our goals are because and you can apply SMART goals your way to the business and then your way
Yeah.
to the employee.
Okay.
And so for me, I do think you can control that. The question I think you're dancing in is, will the person you hired measure against those SMART goals? And really what happens if you don't have those is they think they did and you don't think they did. So having a
Yeah.
SMART goal really gives you concise alignment in communications, which will be a chapter we talk about in the future.
Yes.
And again,
Yeah.
it all is intertwined, right? So the beauty of our podcast is we break them down by chapter, but they really all go together.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I
No,
do
I
think
like
I do
that.
think you set SMART goals for your employees. I had an employee actually ask me if they could set up SMART goals, and I said, "Sure, you can
Okay.
take a stab at it, but I hired you for these purposes. I'll go ahead and fine tune it."
Oh, interesting. Okay. So that I think is a different perspective than in what I hear what you're saying there too. And maybe
A little
it's
bit of both can be true. Yeah.
yeah, they both can be true because what I hear you saying there is that, I hired you to do job A and
Against my SMART
and
goals.
against my SMART goals because I established those. But a couple things that you said that I actually think are pretty smart
Oh,
is
wait,
hmm,
can we say that again?
no pun
A
intended.
couple things I said are pretty smart.
A couple things you said that
Oh,
were
no, I
pretty
was honed
smart.
in on that part. Okay. Oh, look at your mood. We're turning that
Yeah,
frown
yeah,
right
see?
upside down.
Smile
Look
upside
at
yeah, that's right,
this.
right, frown upside down, exactly. So, but a couple things that you said there that I really appreciate is that prior to hiring the person, you had already established what the SMART goals were for job A. I don't see that as much in the industry today, if I'm being
No, no.
completely honest with you. And I think that is then what happens when you get to the performance review and you're kind of digging in. And why that disconnect happens, right, is because
Yes.
I have not established, and I wonder too if part of it fits in because in the environments we're working in today, they're not, sometimes the jobs are not, unless you're, on the line in the factory or something where it's very task oriented, sometimes it can be difficult to identify that. And so employers seem to be like they've backed off a little bit on establishing what the actual goal of that position is before they even hire the person in.
Oh, wow. I don't know that in my industry or firm we see it that way. I just see it more diluted in a job description than alignment to the word SMART. Specific,
Mm,
measurable, achievable.
yeah.
When I put out a job description, I am very good at listing what's achievable, what's specific about the job, all the things that are relevant around what this position does and the time it needs to get done. But what I don't do is measure very well if I didn't
Yeah.
list it that way because the job description is a page and a half of bullets and not lined up to
Right.
relevant, measurable, achievable tasks.
Yeah.
And so that's where I think the communication gets a little lost. And so we actually at the end of last year, or the year before rather, at my firm, we abolished evaluations in a measurement way and we made them more time bound to every 60 days. What is
Oh,
the
okay.
feedback? What are you
Yeah.
doing to achieve? What are your goals? And we
Yes.
specifically lay them out. What are your goals? Almost to the SMART pathway because again, being in peak performance, being rested, being well fueled, eat right, physically
Yeah.
fit, I don't get distracted in that conversation and you become highly productive. And the
Yeah.
job
Yeah.
becomes the success, not you know, the job.
Right, right, right. Yeah. No, that's interesting. I am kind of curious when you're having those conversations with employees, because I agree with you as well. And I've started doing that with my own team too, is that it's more, and I've always been more of a immediate feedback kind of person. I'm not a
Yeah.
wait till the end of the year and
Can't
surprise
remember.
you with
R
everything. Yeah,
right.
I'm telling you, if you're not doing something right, you're gonna know that you're not doing it right. Right.
Against
We're
your
gonna have that
specific but against
conversation.
your your SMART goal.
Yeah.
Against what?
Yeah,
S, specific. You're being specific.
yes, very specific in what my expectations are,
Mhm, mhm.
and I think, sometimes that's where to your point, we're gonna get into this in the communication side of it, but I do think that that's sometimes where SMART goals go sideways is because
Mhm.
we start out with the best of intentions of creating the SMART goal, and then usually it's the measurable side that I think ends up falling short, right? Because we can be
100%.
specific.
I
We've
think, yeah.
already determined it's achievable, right? We
Mhm,
know it's
mhm.
relevant because it's important, and we might even have the time bound because we know it's like, I don't know, it's gotta be done in 60 days or whatever, but that measurable piece, to your point, I think is the one where we come up short.
Well, I think for our listeners on the podcast and the audience we're trying to reach,
Yeah.
this is really an important piece as they move into the ranks of having to measure employees.
Yeah.
When an employee shows up and you're not specific in the
Yeah.
measurable, it can feel like a right
Mhm.
turn for the employee who put all their emphasis on something that wasn't specific,
Oh,
worked
that
their
is
ass
so
off,
true.
and
Yeah.
didn't meet the SMART goals of you with your leadership or your sponsors, right?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
we've gotten really good at my firm about doing before we promote, what are the specifics, before we pay commissions, what are the specific goals? And we get really right down to the decimal point on
Yeah.
those things. And then what's nice is that sometimes in the communication we can see where circumstance allowed for some space. So if it wasn't perfectly achieved against the measurement, but the
Mhm.
effort was aligned, the promotion or the new job can still occur, but that's at the discretion of the person, not the communication at the beginning.
Yes. Yes, yeah, yeah. Well, and you know what I like about that? Because I was just having a conversation with a colleague the other day, is when you don't have that established, then employees don't actually know how to get to the next level, how to achieve,
Right.
how to move forward in that succession. Because if I don't establish that, so then what ends up happening is promotions become arbitrary or they become like, oh, well,
Impossible.
Scott's been
Impossible.
here for, longer than Linda has been here. And it just feels like it's time we give him a promotion.
Right.
that's not a good reason. And now how do you explain to the 5 other people who also feel like they should have got a promotion, why did Scott get the promotion over you? And then how do you get there kind of thing? And so that's what I really like about what you said there. And I think that is also kind of ties back into when you're in that middle management role for sure, why establishing SMART goals for yourself and for your team are so important, because that's where you lose control of the management
100%.
aspect, is when you don't have these established,
And
right?
when leadership sees you getting that established and you use your time in middle management, which everyone should serve,
Yep.
you're refining that to become part of how you operate inherently and turn yourself into someone proven like yourself that ultimately gets shit done. But you
Right.
do it
Yes,
through these
exactly.
steps. And then those people that are getting shit done see you have a methodology, they see you've practiced it, and you've discussed the measurements of the next promotion. So
Yes.
if I were in an interview and I said, what are the my goal is to get promoted and get in your job, I wouldn't say it that way. I'd say, what are the promotions opportunities here? And do you establish what those measurements would be? And if I achieve them, what's the red tape for me getting to the next level? Is there any red
Yeah,
tape? And now you've
absolutely.
had a really concise conversation. You understand the obstacles, and the resentments sort of fade away because then they're
It
just based
does.
on fact and structure. Well, and then future chapters, right? And also it's a two-way street. So you said, the employee has to set their goals. I think the employer has to align their goals to who they
1,000%.
hire, right?
Oh my
So
gosh,
we're
that is such a good, yeah, I'm glad you said
right.
that. Yeah.
Right,
Mhm.
because it ties it back to that, but it also ties it to the concepts of leadership. And it's important for me to reference at this intersection also that what we're doing here is talking about the value add skills of professional leadership, right? In the
Yeah.
office of creating a well-being environment for folks. And
Mhm.
it is tried and true proven that partnerships, relationships, goals, habits, communication, self-care, leadership, coaching, these are all things that
Yeah.
are intertwined that we put emphasis on the podcast, not only because I've told them in a story in a book and we have a
No.
companion guide that breaks down the exercises, but we
Yeah,
bring the real life experience to that. And I'm excited
exactly.
again to report we're going to go a little deeper in the next
Yes.
version where we can talk about what it looks like, not just
Yeah.
how you do it. So we have role play scenarios and different things that we can unpack that describe vision instead of
Yeah.
task. And
I
right now
like
we're
that.
still dancing in the task area of this, but it's an
Yeah.
exciting time. And I think goals are really relevant. So we've done them early in our season so that we can help people establish time focused
Exactly.
or SMART goals.
If you're listening, here's one thing that I would encourage you to do that, is start with just one goal, right?
Yeah.
Just one.
Practice.
Don't get 10 of them. It's not a full life overhaul. We're not asking you to change everything. Just pick one and
hmm
then make it specific enough that you actually know what action to take, because I
hmm
think that is the key. And I know that's where I've personally struggled with the SMART goal, is making it specific. If you go too broad or too generic, it's really hard to then know what action you need to take behind that.
Right.
So do
That's right.
that. Make sure it aligns with what matters to you, not what you think should matter.
Yes.
Another thing in my full vulnerability today in my
I know what
cranky
you're going to
mood
say.
is that it's really making sure that it does matter to you, and not what I think Scott thinks it should matter to me, or what I think, my husband does, or my boss does. It truly is like what matters to me. So
Well,
I
and we
think
have you have a nice summary in our notes about calling it your current season. So take that just a little
yes.
further and recognize that in different stations in life, the priorities of how you execute shift a little. And being
Yes.
aware of that is what I'm talking about in volume 3, right? So you take it
Yeah.
to the next level, but current season is really the next teaser. So give yourself a little
Yes.
bit of grace if you're 60 and you want to go do an Ironman, then
Yeah.
maybe your specific measurable and achievable goals are going to shift a little around that. So
Yes.
being aware of that comes from working at peak performance. It comes from
Yep.
self-care when we get into that next chapter.
Yeah.
And it comes from taking a minute to figure
Yes.
out how to execute on that, right?
I totally agree. And the last thing I would just leave you with in our takeaways is just give yourself permission to focus on progress, not perfection.
Beautiful.
Because, as a recovering perfectionist, I know that sometimes
Are you
that
recovering?
also,
Are you recovering? I
maybe
might
I'm
say that
in
that's a different
recovery, or
episode.
maybe I need to sign up for recovery. Maybe
Maybe
that's where
maybe
I'm
our
at.
goal should be that you recover.
Absolutely.
Let's get real specific here, Linda.
And let's get real specific here because that is part of the problem is that when you focus on perfection, you're never going to get the progress that you need because it's no longer an achievable goal because you're
Right.
trying to be perfect, right? And I think that's the big piece is are you making progress in what you're trying to do there? So that's what, I would just say when you think about setting a goal and actually following through on it, how does it show up in your partnerships, your relationships, and even your self-care? So always kind
Yeah.
of keep those
Yeah.
3 things in mind, right? If you liked this episode, if it
Yeah.
resonated with you, make sure that you're following along, like, subscribe. You can find us on all streaming services. You can find us on
Yes.
LinkedIn. And Scott, I think there's a website too, isn't there?
Well, there's a really good website that you can www.howyougothere.com, which also spells howyougothere.com. And in there, we are providing free exercises from the companion guide up to goals. So if you've listened and you've been paying attention, we've gone through partnerships and relationships. We've talked about habits and goals. And I'm not forcing you to buy the companion guide at this intersection because if you're interested in those exercises, you can simply go to the website and download them and fill them in yourself.